Let's do this. Nat 5 history. Final topic. We've done this recently, so I'll kind of do this a bit quicker. It's quite a big topic, this one, especially the first area. So Nazi Germany. Hitler and Germany between 1919 and 1959, of course it is. So, area 1 is quite a big chunky topic. So Weimar Germany from 1919 to 1933. So Weimar Germany was the name given to the new Germany after the war finished in 1918. So area 1, you need to know about, after the war ended, how was Germany impacted. So Germany was in a really terrible state. There was a lack of food, there was a lack of supplies because the war was over. Also, because of that, many Germans were starving, there was a lack of food, and there was a feeling of revolution in the air. So there was mutiny among sailors at Kiel. There was mutinies or rebellions among communists or socialists about more rights, more food, and more jobs. So basically, after the war, Germany was in a really fragile position. The war had exhausted Germany's supplies for 4 years. So lack of food, a lack of jobs, unemployment. Many soldiers came back from the war feeling, what's going on here? I've given my life or fought for Germany for 4 years. I'm coming back to this awful state. There was revolution in the air. So the Kaiser had to flee Germany. There were Soviets or workers' groups or communists set up to protest against the backdrop of unemployment and a lack of jobs, etc. Soldiers in Kiel mutinied and refused to fight. And in 1918, and then the war ended in 1919, Germany signed or were made to sign the Treaty of Versailles. And many Germans were not happy with this treaty. They believed that Germany had failed its people. The November criminals, remember, they signed this treaty. This treaty made Germany like a poor state. So area 1, Germany was on its knees. The Treaty of Versailles. So the Treaty of Versailles is a really popular topic that comes up quite a lot. So the Treaty of Versailles was basically made mainly by America, France, and the UK. So America was Woodrow Wilson, France was George Clemenceau, and Britain was Lloyd George. And George Clemenceau got his way. He really wanted to punish Germany, really wanted to punish. Woodrow Wilson and Lloyd George wanted a just peace based on 14 points, creating a new League of Nations, but George Clemenceau of France was determined to punish Germany as harshly as possible. Remember, in the Franco-Prussian War in 1871, 1870, Germany lost Alsace-Lorraine, France lost Alsace-Lorraine to the new Germany, and France was desperate for revenge on Germany. So, Germany lost land. So Germany lost land or territory because of the Treaty of Versailles. So things like Germany could not train soldiers in the Rhineland. So the Rhineland was on the border with France, and Germany could not train troops in there for military purposes. Also, Germany could not unite with Austria, called Anschluss. That was forbidden. As I've told you, Germany lost Alsace-Lorraine to France as well. And one final bit was the Polish corridor. So Germany was split, and there was an area of Poland where many Germans were in, and many Germans were not happy that this was happening. Economically, Germany was punished a lot. So remember, if you punish a country after the war's finished negatively, then that country is going to be even weaker, and that's what happened to Germany. So the biggest issue or the biggest impact of the war on Germany of Versailles was reparation payments of £6.6 billion. So this basically meant that Germany was weakened. Germany lost a lot of its coal areas, the Saar and so on, and couldn't produce coal to pay back this money. And military. So military-wise, France was determined to weaken Germany, to make it like a less powerful nation. So the Rhineland was demilitarized, so Germany could not train troops. That made France safer. The army was reduced to only 100,000 men, which is a token force. There was no air force and a very, very reduced navy. So the Treaty of Versailles had a really awful impact on Germany. The November criminals, stab in the back, like people let Germany down. How dare they sign this treaty? We're a proud nation. And this created even more problems in Germany. That basically there was people unhappy with unemployment, a lack of jobs, and the Treaty of Versailles added to this feeling of anger across Germany. Right, so we have got the new republic, the new Weimar Germany. Why Weimar? Because Berlin was mad for it. Berlin was mental. You couldn't sign anything there or discuss. There was revolution there. So the new politicians met at Weimar and they signed and made the new Weimar Republic. So you need to know about, in Weimar Germany, what was democracy like? Describe Weimar Germany. What could people do in Weimar Germany? So over 20-year-old men and women could now vote. In a democracy, which Weimar Germany was, the right to free speech, the right to religion, there'll be a president in charge of the country. There'll be a parliament called the German Reichstag to make and pass laws. And there'd also be a chancellor that would basically work with the president to run the new Weimar Germany. But there was many problems with Weimar Germany. One thing was the new voting system, which was called proportional representation, or PR. All you need to know that this led to many parties not getting enough power, parties falling out and fighting and squabbling over laws. And this took longer to pass laws and to basically improve Germany. So people couldn't agree on the best way to improve Germany. They fell out. Also, in the constitution of the new Weimar Germany, a document which says how it was run, Article 48 gave the president power to basically do anything he wants in a time of crisis to take over Germany. So basically, the new Weimar Germany was a democracy. There was a parliament called the Reichstag, led by a president, a chancellor. People could vote for 20, the right to free speech and the right to free religion. So Weimar Germany was very, very, very unpopular among some Germans. They believed that they liked a strong leader, a strong Kaiser. Their democracy was weak. The new voting system created weaknesses in Weimar Germany. And one such group was a group called the Spartacus, led by Karl Liebknecht and Rosa Luxemburg. So the Spartacus, what they wanted an equal Germany where the working classes had more power. Remember, in Russia at this time, or just before this time in 1917, there was a revolution where the Bolsheviks took power and overthrew the government. The Spartacus wanted to do the same in Germany. So what actually happened then? So in January 1919, about 50,000 people went on strike in Berlin. I went to Berlin, remember, in February, and I saw signs for Karl Liebknecht and Rosa Luxemburg, famous streets, because that was where the Spartacus rebellion took place. So the Spartacus seized newspaper buildings, communication buildings like radio, and armed themselves and basically wanted to protest against this government. But it was poorly organized. There wasn't much excuse me. And because of that, many people left the rebellion. People started to go away and move away from it, and because of that, it started to fall away. And then the government called in the Freikorps or the Free Corps, who basically were soldiers who didn't like Weimar, but they didn't like Spartacus very much either. And the Freikorps came in and they killed a lot of Spartacus, and they arrested and later killed Rosa Luxemburg, and Karl Liebknecht. Also, over 100 workers were killed. So the Spartacus rebellion ultimately failed. Poorly organized, a lack of planning, the leaders were caught, and people began to move away from the protest. Another protest was a very, very, very important one. 1923. So in the exam, it might say the Beer Hall Putsch or the Munich Putsch. A putsch is an attempt to overthrow and to take power in a country. So in Germany in 1923, the Nazi Party were quite a new party led by Hitler. By 1922, the end of it, they had roughly 20,000 members. So what Hitler wanted to do was like Mussolini in Italy. He wanted to march into Munich or into Berlin later on and take power, which in Italy, Mussolini marched to Rome. Hitler wanted to copy Mussolini and do the same. So the aim was to overthrow the Bavarian government, which was in Munich, and then gradually to seize Munich and then gradually work out and spread across Germany and take over the Weimar government. Their target was a guy called von Kahr. So von Kahr was a Bavarian sort of like governor. He was in charge of Bavaria. They wanted to get him on side. Ludendorff was a very famous war general, and they got the support of Ludendorff. So in the exam, the question might be a source question, might be a knowledge question about the beer hall or Munich Putsch. So what happened? So November the 8th in 1923, the Baugenbräu Keller beer hall. Hitler came in to the beer hall with his stormtroopers, put a gun in the air and said, "The National Revolution has begun." And he asked von Kahr and other leaders to come into a side room to discuss Hitler's plans and what he wanted to overthrow the Bavarian government, to seize power in all of Germany, to march in Munich. And he got the support of these people. But as time went on, things were going quite slowly. Hitler left to go somewhere else, to another beer hall, to see what was going on, to check on like progress of organising this attack on Munich. Ludendorff was a bit like chilled out. He let von Kahr and others go. It was said to go and see their wives. But as you know, this is a very funny story. They left. They went and told the police and the army. Hitler came back and what, Ludendorff, what have you done? Where are the people? Well, let them go. So Hitler and the rest of the SS or the SA and Ludendorff waited in the beer hall. The next day, they came out in the streets of Munich and the army were waiting for them. There was a standoff and people were shot. Hitler escaped, etc. So Hitler was arrested. He went to court, charged with treason against Germany. He used his court cases like publicity. He gave speeches about the failures of the war generals. He let Germany down, but was stabbed in the back. He brought up the Jewish question as well. And many people were impressed by Hitler. He only got 5 years in prison, but got out after 9 months. Now, treason is the death penalty. But Hitler was liked, admired, and he was treated very leniently. As you know, in prison, he wrote Mein Kampf, My Struggle, and in this book he outlined his plan basically for war to solve the Jewish problem that he saw, the Jewish question. The final topic in the Weimar Germany bit is looking at basically the economic issues with Weimar Germany. So, 1923, Germany fell behind in their payments of reparations to France. So France obviously wanted to really punish Germany, came into the Saar, or the Ruhrland, took over the running of it, and that meant that Germany had less money. So that was one problem that Germany faced, that France came in, took over key coalfields in the Ruhr because Germany fell behind in payments, and this meant that Germany had lost even more money. So hyperinflation occurs where you print too much money that you can't back up. So hyperinflation occurred because the Germans printed more money to pay the workers in the Ruhr, and that money increased. Prices increased as well. Many people lost their savings. The middle class lost their savings. The elderly suffered as they had a fixed income, and they suffered as well. Also, lack of food shortages in Germany as well, a rise in crime, and so on. So basically, in Germany, you might get asked about the economic issues faced by Weimar Germany. You could talk about the reparation payments. That Germany couldn't afford it, the 6,600 billion. That Germany was in the right state, had no real industry to make money from. That caused economic issues. Also, Hyperinflation 1923. France took over the Ruhr, made it even worse for Germany to pay it back. Hyperinflation was caused. This meant that people's money was worthless. Like people would carry like baskets about, wheelbarrows of money. Savings went down. Unemployment went up. If you were elderly, because your money was fixed, you also lost a lot of your savings. Okay, so that is the first topic, Weimar Germany. It's quite a big topic, but you need to revise after the war finished, how was Germany affected? The Treaty of Versailles, what did it do to Germany? The Weimar Republic, what was it like? What could people do? Democracy, president, etc. The Spartacus Rebellion, what happened? The Munich Putsch, what happened? And finally, what were the economic challenges or problems faced by Weimar Germany? The next topic, is the Nazi rise to power. So the next topic is one that's quite a good one that you know a lot about. So Hitler and the Nazis. How did the Nazis and Hitler gain power by March 1933? So this is a popular question. It could be a knowledge source or it could be a 9-marker. To what extent was the failures of the Weimar Republic the main reason for the rise of the Nazis? So 9-marker, look at Weimar's failings, look at the Great Depression and its impact on the rise of the Nazis, and look at Hitler's promises and his speeches. So let's talk about number one then. So Hitler was a very charismatic speaker who appealed to a range of Germans. So he promised working class people more land, more jobs, to reduce unemployment, and because of that, they supported him. He promised, like true German nationalists who loved the German nation, that he would create what's called Lebensraum, like more living space for the German people. He promised as well to right the wrongs of the Treaty of Versailles, to dismantle this diktat treaty that affected Germany so harshly by taking the Rhineland back, by increasing military, and so on. If you were racist, he promised racists, obviously, who were against Jews, he promised to eradicate Jews, which was a key part of his policy, anti-Semitism against Jewish people. And businessmen wanted a strong Germany. They wanted a strong economy. That in Weimar wasn't happening. So Hitler promised them, basically, if you give me money, if you support me, I will create more jobs. I will improve the economy. I will build more factories. I will make sure that Germany is a strong, rich country, and I'll give you contracts, steelworks, factories, and so on. So Hitler's promises to a whole range of Germans made him a very, very appealing person and to gain power by 1933. Secondly, his speeches. Hitler had a knack for capturing the attention of many people. His speeches, he would practice in front of mirrors. He would be passionate when he spoke about Germany, his pride in Germany, restoring Germany to its former glory. In Munich, he began in Munich, touring the beer halls in Munich, interrupting opposition groups, the communist groups, going into meetings and causing like a stushy, causing like a fight to break out by saying anti-Semitic things, by blaming the communists. He was very good, a bit like Trump today, he was very good at knowing what people want and saying things to get people to support him. So his speeches, his use of language, his slogans, his use of, like, he knew what German people wanted. He wanted more land, he wanted a stronger Germany, he wanted more jobs, destroy the Versailles Treaty, and he basically promised that in abundance. Another reason was that the Versailles Treaty. So Hitler basically used that as a key part of his policy to gain power. Hitler said, if you support me, I will destroy the Versailles Treaty. I will increase the size of the German army. I will take back the Rhineland. And because of that, many, many Germans supported him. Another reason for the rise of the Nazi was basically because of the failings of Weimar Germany. So Weimar Germany, as you know, had many economic issues. The Ruhr crisis, hyperinflation, the reparation payments to the Versailles Treaty, and Hitler promised to basically improve the German economy, create more employment through building of factories, building of industry and roads and new cars. and many Germans supported him for that. In my opinion, the major reason for the rise of Hitler Nazis was the Wall Street crash. So America in 1929 suffered greatly from the stock market crashing, and this also affected Germany. So in 1929, Germany was in crisis again. Hyperinflation, a lack of savings, a lack of jobs. And Hitler was there at the right time to pick up the pieces and to promise the Germans what they wanted to hear. More jobs, more income. And because of that, they voted for him. And that's the key point. Hitler gained power in Nazis using democratic means. They were voted into power in March 1933. And finally, propaganda was also very important to the rise of the Nazis. So propaganda was central. The use of effective speeches, the use of posters, the use of slogans, keywords to turn many Germans against Jewish people, to turn Germans against, communists are your enemy. They will bring Germany down, teaching Germans about that. And because of them, because of these, the use of propaganda, they basically gained support. So March 1933, you need to know why many Germans supported Hitler, Hitler's promises, Hitler's speeches, the failures of Weimar Germany, the Great Depression of 1929. And remember, Hitler gained power democratically. In the July 1932 election, the Nazis won more votes than any other party. And because of that, Hitler was made Chancellor of Germany. Okay. The next topic in this bit is, after 1933, what did Hitler and the Nazis do to consolidate their power? So this is a different topic, basically, from the rise of the Nazis. Please bear that in mind. You might get a question about, by March 1933, or by 1933, sorry, how did the Nazis gain power? Then after that, what did they do to build and consolidate their power? So the first thing that happened was the Reichstag fire. So by itself, this could be a separate question. Like in the Reichstag fire, what happened? It could be a source question. So February 1933, the Reichstag building, the German parliament, was burnt down. And the Nazis blamed the communists because van der Lubbe for setting the Reichstag building on fire. So Hitler used this as a reason to gain more power. So the Reichstag fire gave Hitler an excuse to increase his powers almost from Chancellor to dictator or Führer. So for example, he expelled all communists from Parliament, and anyone who refused was sent to prison. He also passed the Enabling Act. The Enabling Act basically gave him more power. It banned, like other parties, it banned free speech. He controlled the media and so on. So the Reichstag fire basically was a starting point for Hitler and the Nazis using that as a reason that the communists are a threat. They're going to bring Germany down. So communists were expelled from Parliament. They were sent to prison. He passed the Enabling Act to give himself more power, controlling newspapers, other parties, trade unions were banned. And then crucially, if you remember Article 48, so Hindenburg was president, and he basically used this Article 48 to give himself and Hitler more powers. Newspapers were censored, controlled, letters were controlled by the Nazis. So this was the first stepping stone to Hitler becoming Führer and dictator of Germany. So the Reichstag fire was one area. Now, how the Nazis consolidated their power could be a 9 marker. How important was violence and intimidation as a reason why the Nazis were able to consolidate their power up to 1934? So you could look at the Reichstag fire, look at violence, intimidation, the use of emergency powers, the night of the lawn knives. So number one is violence and intimidation. So Dachau in 1933 was opened near Munich. That was the first concentration camp, and anyone who opposed the Nazis, political opponents, was sent to Dachau. So people realized quite quickly that if you spoke out against the Nazis, there was the Gestapo, the secret police, who would spy on you, who would encourage others to tell on you, like teachers or kids, that if you criticised or spoke badly of Hitler and the Nazis. So this culture in Germany of intimidation and violence created a fear that people were scared to speak out and criticise the Nazis because of Dachau, because of the threat of the Gestapo in Germany spying, using information against you. As I've told you previously, Hitler and the Nazis used emergency powers. They passed laws to give themselves more power. So in 1933 in March, Hitler passed the Enabling Act, or the Nazis passed it, and this banned parties and trade unions in Germany. And basically, it gave Hitler power to make laws and not the Reichstag. This increased the power of the Nazis. One final area was something called the Night of the Long Knives in June 1934. Ernst Röhm was in charge of the SA. He was plotting against Hitler apparently to combine the army with the SA, give himself more power, Röhm, and to take over and seize power from Hitler. So Night of the Long Knives involved Hitler using the SS, led by Himmler, to go around target SA leaders and kill them and basically wipe out the threat of the SA. And this was called the Night of the Long Knives. So the Nazis, remember, they got power February, March 1933. That could be one question. And the other question we've talked about, what did they do to consolidate this power? So the Reichstag fire, what happened? How did the Nazis use that to gain more power? Violence, intimidation, the use of camps like Dachau, the use of the Gestapo to threaten and spy on people, the use of emergency powers or laws, the Enabling Act, to ban other parties. And the final bit was to eradicate or get rid of opposition to Hitler within the Nazis. The Night of the Long Knives took away the SA, and basically the SS came on board. Heinrich Himmler was in charge of that, and they were fully committed to Hitler, and that gave the Nazis far more power. Okay. The next topic is the Nazis, how they control Germany. So once they've now risen to power, they've consolidated in their power. What did the Nazis do to control Germany totally? Topic 3 is the Nazis and how they control Germany. So a quite famous, or not famous, but a popular 9-mark question is something like, to what extent was the use of fear and terror the main way the Nazis controlled Germany? So fear and terror, propaganda, controlling religion were all ways the Nazis used to control Germany. Before we get to that, the new German dictatorship, the Nazis, what did it look like? So Hitler was now Führer. So Hindenburg had died, and Hitler now abolished Chancellor and became Supreme Führer and leader of Germany. So basically, no democracy. We've got one person in charge who controls everything, the army, makes the laws, and so on. Like Kim Jong-un today, dictator Führer. Hitler believed, and Nazis believed, in the Aryan race, racist beliefs, that they were the master race. They were the Aryan race, descending from like Teutonic Knights mythology, and was very important to Hitler. He believed that Jews and Slavs and other groups were below German, that Untermenschen, like subhumans, and they had to be made slaves or eradicated as they were not part of the master race. The Nazis also wanted to expand across Europe. Lebensraum, to more living space for the German people. So Hitler's ambition was to make a greater Germany. So already Austria, Czechoslovakia, Poland, to gradually take all these places and get more space for the great German nation. So that was the nature, or what the Nazi government, or the Nazi sort of government was like in Germany. So how did the Nazis control Germany? What did they do to control Germany and also remove opposition? So as I mentioned previously, the Gestapo was one way. So the Gestapo was one way that they used fear and terror. The Gestapo would be a network of police, or sorry, not police, but spies in the street, maybe in shops and butchers. Like if you spoke about Hitler in a negative way and they heard you, they pass it on to the authorities, might get arrested, might get sent to a camp. Teachers at school, if they criticised the Nazis, children were encouraged to tell on them. even their parents. Children were told if the parents at the dinner table criticised the Nazis as well, then basically they were encouraged to report. Across Germany, there was over 150,000 informants in plain clothes. Like they didn't wear a badge saying, I'm in the Gestapo. They could be anywhere. So you had to be on guard at all time. So this constant worry in Germany, the constant fear and terror of being caught out, of telling a story on the Nazis or criticising Nazis, meant that basically you could be arrested, and that maintained control, and opposition was wiped out. The SS was led by Heinrich Himmler, the wee guy with glasses. Once the SA were wiped out like the lawn knives, the SS basically were in charge of protecting Germany from opposition, from enemies, and they were in charge of the concentration camps like Dachau in 1933. So anyone who was not part of the Aryan race, political opponents, homosexuals, Jews, gypsies, were sent to camps. They were not part of the German race, and they were punished by being sent to camps. Anyone that criticised the Nazis, the communists who were still criticising, any religious groups were also sent to camps as well. So life in camps was difficult. Lack of food, working hard, labour, and so on. Remember, in this topic, we don't do the Holocaust. So do not mention death camps. Look at the use of concentration camps as a way to control Germany. So fear and terror was one way. The Gestapo, secret police, the SS, the use of camps. Another way was the use of propaganda and censorship. So Joseph Goebbels was in charge of Nazi propaganda. He helped Hitler design an image for the Nazis. He helped Hitler prepare for his speeches that Hitler gave. So propaganda, like posters, turning Germans against Jews, posters turning Germans against the communists, making films showing Jews or communists in a negative way, made many Germans support and not disobey the Nazis. The Nuremberg rallies took place every year in Nuremberg, obviously. Massive meetings like fire, swastikas, big massive banners, Hitler speaking. It was all for show, all to create a strong Germany led by the Nazis. The Olympics in Berlin, again, was to showcase the power of the Nazis, that they controlled the German people. Posters showed work hard, do it for Germany. Radios were given to all people so they could listen to Nazi speeches and Nazi propaganda. So basically, propaganda was very, very important. Censorship, controlling the media, controlling newspapers, controlling the radio, controlling cinema. Everything was done to make sure the Nazis' point of view was put forward and control the German people. They controlled newspapers and only published positive news about the war and about the Nazis. They also controlled the church. So Hitler created the Protestant Reich Church, that controlled Protestant religion in Germany. Catholic priests were arrested and tortured and sent to camps as well. So Hitler and the Nazis controlled the German people in a variety of ways, and they removed opposition, use of fear and terror, the Gestapo, the use of camps, use of propaganda, through posters, through radios, through slogans, loudspeakers, control of religion as well. Religion is a way to change people's minds. If you control religion, you control expression, and if you create your own church, like the Protestant Reich Church, then you control the minds of people. Okay. The next topic was, in Germany, what happened to Jews and other groups of people. Now, the main focus of this topic is Jews and how their life changed. So the question might be to describe what happened to Jews and other groups and explain why they were treated this way. So in the book I gave you, the revision book and the answer booklet with answers in it, it gives you examples of these questions. So this topic is quite a big topic. But in 1933, Jewish people were removed from key jobs like lawyers and teachers as well. Also remember, at schools, the Nazis basically, if Jews did go to school at this point, they were ridiculed, they were bullied, They were spat on, beaten up. At a certain point, Jews were not allowed to go to school at all. Also in 1933, there was a boycott of Jewish shops. Nazis told Germans not to shop in Jewish stores. They wrote Jude on the shops. They smashed windows to try and make sure that no one shopped in Jewish stores. 1935, the Nuremberg laws were passed. Nuremberg laws meant that Jews were no longer German citizens. They couldn't fly the German flag. They couldn't marry non-Germans. They lost the right to call themselves Germans. So the Nuremberg laws basically was official law that put on paper that the Nazis were passing laws to punish the Jews. 1938, Jews were no longer doctors. That to carry a special ID card with the word J on it, if they didn't carry it, then they could get in serious trouble. Also, in November 1938, there was Kristallnacht. This could be a separate question. Kristallnacht, on the night of broken glass. Basically, it was a pogrom, an organised attack on German Jews. Synagogues were burnt down. Jewish shops and businesses were looted and destroyed. And many Jews were sent to camps. And many Jews were sent to ghettos. This was the process starting. Kristallnacht meant that if you were Jewish, it was now very hard to leave Germany because the Nazis began to move you to ghettos, and this began the process. But remember, don't do the Holocaust, remember. So, Jews lost everything. They lost their homes to Nazis. They lost their profession, teachers, doctors, couldn't go to school. There was Kristallnacht, the Nuremberg laws, and so on. But there was some opposition to the Nazis. So opposition to the Nazis was quite scarce due to the use of fear, terror, the Gestapo, the camps, and so on. But some Catholic priests used their power to basically organise protest, choose religion as a way to fight back against the Nazis. So the Pope issued a message criticising Hitler, that he was a mad prophet, that he was like dangerous, etc. Martin Niemöller was a Protestant priest who formed the Confessional Church to oppose the Nazis. So religion, some people did use their power, but not that much. There was also the Swing Kids. So the Swing Kids were people in Germany, in Hamburg, who would listen to like swing music that was American based, that was against authority. They would grow their hair, wear different clothes, all trying to disobey the Nazi rules. They would clash or fight with SS soldiers across Germany and so on. The White Rose were in Munich. The White Rose were students in Munich University who founded this group, who released leaflets and pamphlets criticising the Nazis. So there was some opposition. Religious groups, Catholic Church, criticised Hitler, the Pope, called him a mad prophet. There was Niemöller. He created a Protestant Confessional Church against the Nazis. There was the Swing Kids, who rebelled against the Nazis. And there was the White Rose. Another popular question that might get asked was, in Germany, why was there little to no opposition to the Nazis? So this is basically, number one, because there was no opposition left. The communists had been forced to leave Germany. They were banned from operating. Any opposition to Hitler was now gone, and anyone did remain lacked the power and lacked the control or the money or the resources to do anything. The Night of the Long Knives was another way. So Hitler took away the SA, and that meant that there was less opposition to the Nazis. After 1933, when Hitler passed the Enablement Act, all other political parties were banned. Also, the Gestapo made sure that no one opposed the Nazis because they would spy on you, they'd threaten you. The use of camps was a tool to minimize or to lower the threat of opposition to the Nazis. Also, class, many Germans supported the Nazis. Hitler had basically reduced unemployment, autobahns, factories, Volkswagen cars and so on, strength through joy, the program. He made Germany internally a strong country again. So many Germans didn't oppose him because they liked him. So this topic is basically what they did to control Germany. You've got fear and terror. you've got propaganda, you've got censorship, you've got the use of basically of Gestapo, of SS, you've got their own religion, the Protestant Church. What happened to the Jews and other groups in Germany? And opposition to the Nazis, why was there none or little at all? Okay. The final topic is the Nazi social policies, how they affected life in Germany for people, and the economic policies. Okay. So the Nazis and Hitler were elected in 1933 on the promise of creating a better Germany and a better economy in Germany, and Hitler and Nazis delivered on this promise. So unemployment was dramatically reduced in Germany. And the reason for this was firstly because of the war. So the war started in 1939 means there's more demand for weapons, for tanks, for steel, for metals. So the use of this, or the use of materials, meant there's more jobs in Germany. So the war created wealth and jobs within Germany. Also as well, Hitler and Nazis organised a huge program of public works, like building roads, railways, etc. The autobahns were first invented during Hitler's time. So this again was very important in improving the economy of Germany. If you're building more houses and more railways and more roads, then you're giving people jobs, they're getting paid, they're spending money, and that boosts the economy. Another key thing was Hitler began the people's car, Volkswagen. So the Nazis developed this car, the Volkswagen, and built this car, and that created more jobs as well. So Hitler and the Nazis internally in Germany helped to create a strong economy. Their policies were one of creating full employment, creating more jobs through the war effort in factories, making munitions and weapons. On the roads, a massive building campaign of roads improved the economy. Germany's railway network was ripped up and improved as well. And a massive housing program was also built as well. Remember, in 1933, Hitler passed the Nibelungen Act and banned trade unions. So in its place was the German Labour Front. So the German Labour Front was a trade union run by the Nazis, but you couldn't strike. You couldn't not go to your job or to work. So with the German Labour Front, the Nazis promised to protect people, but in reality, it wasn't really worth much because you could disobey the Nazis, you couldn't refuse to work. The German Labour Service in 1935 made it compulsory for people who are unemployed to complete some sort of work in factories, in roads, etc. And the final economic policy was something called the Strength Through Joy program. So if you were a good German and a good Nazi and you worked hard, you might get rewarded with holidays or days out or cinema trips. Or you might get a car, but the car was really a false promise. So the Nazis made like a saving scheme. We could save up for a Volkswagen, for a car, but in reality, hardly anyone got the car. But it was all part of the Nazis' economic plan to create a culture of hard work. Do it for Germany, do it for the mother nation. And if you work hard, you'll get rewarded with more jobs, more pay, days out to the cinema, and so on. Okay, so the Nazis did improve the economy through factories being built, autobahns, Volkswagen. The war created jobs. The Strength Through Joy program, and also the German Labour Front was a trade union. The next topic is militarism. So what did the Nazis do to create sort of a military state in Germany? So the use of propaganda, the use of posters, kind of stereotyped boys and girls into certain roles. The boys were meant to be German soldiers, that they were part of a great German military nation. And the boys were taught these key skills to be a good soldier and so on, to join the Hitler Youth, to run, to work hard, to do fitness, to camp out, to be like a good German soldier. So that was one way, the Hitler Youth for boys. Another thing as well was Hitler, again, in the 1930s, began to disband or break up the Treaty of Versailles. So he began to increase the size of the German army. He began to increase the size of the Air Force. as I taught you, the Spanish Civil War, Hitler used that 1936 as a training ground almost for the Nazi Luftwaffe, for the new planes to go in and to bomb sort of targets against Franco, who was a fascist who Hitler supported. So the war effort saw a great military restructuring of the German economy. Factories built on a massive scale, armaments, weapons, tanks, planes, and that created a military state and so on. The army was increased from 100,000 to 1.4 million, and in 1935 conscription was introduced as well. So all of this was to create a military state in Germany. So the use of the Hitler Youth, the use of propaganda to instill in boys and young men to be a good German soldier. World War II, the building up towards the war of increasing Germany's military strength in its army and its navy. Propaganda posters as well about the strength of German military. The use of Nuremberg laws, even Nuremberg rallies were like a military spectacle of like there was like soldiers marching about, regimented, organized, there was tanks, maybe planes flying over, all to like show how strong military Germany was. Education in Germany. So education in Germany had a big change. So we spoke about how Jews could not go to school anymore. So that made sure that only the pure Germans, like German people or children, were being taught. And they were taught Nazi ideas. If you've seen the boy in striped pajamas, they hire a tutor for the boy and girl in it, and he teaches them like German ideas and like German strong and how the Jews are bad for Germany, how Germany was wronged in the Treaty of Versailles. So the Nazis controlled basically school textbooks, propaganda posters were all created to teach kids about the greatness of Nazi Germany. Any teacher who disobeyed the Nazis were kicked out. Teachers would be trained on Nazi ideologies and Nazi ideas as well. Universities were also as well controlled by the Nazis. Any lecturers who refused to obey the Nazis were sent to camps or were made to do hard labour. So education basically was now almost like Nazified. There was no Jews in school. School textbooks were designed by the Nazis to teach German ideas, German greatness. The Jews are against Germany. The Treaty of Versailles wronged Germany, about the future of Germany being good and positive. Propaganda posters were placed in school of Hitler, key slogans to encourage young people to support Hitler as well. Remember the boy in striped pajamas? The girl gets a bit older and tears down the posters of like dolls or something and puts up like Hitler and Nazi posters because at school you've been taught those ideas. If you taught that long enough, if you're brainwashed as a young person, you're basically going to believe that. So subjects basically were taught with a pro-Nazi ideology or bias and all about basically the history of Germany and how great it was as well. Biologically as well, how they were taught that Germans were above like the human, like the untermenschen, undesirables, like Jews and Slavs and so on. Girls at school were taught domestic skills, maybe cleaning, cooking, and boys were taught how to be sort of like strong, effective leaders. So education did change quite a lot in Germany, and basically they almost became like Nazi schools. There was also different Hitler Youth groups. So on the one hand, there was the boys group, the Hitler Youth. They were taught to go to camps. They were taught military skills, team building skills, fitness skills, camping skills, how to be good soldiers and physically strong. Girls joined the League of German Maidens, and they were taught to be good Aryan mothers. It was their job to basically bring up and to produce the future offspring for Germany, the Aryan race. So they were taught cooking, cleaning, domestic skills. So make sure you revise the Hitler Youth for boys, the camping out, the fitness, use of weapons, etc. And girls were far different. They were taught domestic skills. Female adults, so women as adults, they had a key role in Germany as well. So Hitler and Goebbels made propaganda posters showing women as being the heart of the household, as being domestic goddesses, looking after children. It's their job to raise the future sort of German nation or German kids. So it was their job to basically to look after the house, to look after the kids, to make sure that the husband and the kids are looked after and fed. Also, there was a law passed called the Encouragement of Marriage, that you got a loan for 1,000 marks, and for every child you had, you kept 250 marks, and if you had more than 8 children, you were given a gold medal. Okay, so that's a lot of work for the man and the woman to have 8 kids. Women were meant to dress in typical German style, hair tied up in like a bun or plaited, not wear makeup, be like traditional Germans. So women were given the role of domestic to look after the husband, the kids, to raise children, and that was their role. The Nuremberg rallies took place every year. 1923 they began, but in 1933 they went to Nuremberg, and there was built a purpose-built area built for the Nazis rallies. So people would go across Germany to attend these rallies. The young people, the armed forces, they were big spectacles. It was all designed to show how great the Nazis were, propaganda. So the Nazis, the SS, were dressed immaculately, properly. Uniform was really important. It was all like militarized, all organized, and that looked effective. There were soldiers marching with flags and drums and Nazi swastikas and symbols. There were torchlight processions at night. The dark, the fire made it look quite important, like glorified it. Hitler gave speeches. So obviously Hitler would come and last and build up to this great occasion. So that is Nazi Germany. So that is the last video. So good luck in your exam this Thursday. You'll smash it. All the best. Let's do it.